Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're zooming straight into one of the most emotionally charged intersections of sports and global history you could possibly imagine. Have you ever wondered how a simple game of football can morph into a proxy war for decades of geopolitical tension? Well, we just need to look at the incredibly dramatic aftermath of the 2026 World Cup semifinal between England and Argentina. People call this the world's only transcontinental derby. It's a clash where the heavy weight of history literally spills out onto the pitch, completely transforming a sporting event into a fierce battle for national pride.
Now, just moments after the final whistle blew, cementing Argentina's place in the final, a massive, joyous football celebration instantly transformed into a really stark geopolitical statement. Several Argentine players proudly held up a banner reading, "Las Malvinas son Argentinas," the Falkland Islands are Argentinian. Just like that, in a split second, a sporting triumph was explicitly linked to a bitter territorial dispute that's been lingering for over 4 decades. To really grasp exactly why this banner appeared and why this rivalry burns so fiercely, we've got to unpack the visceral drama of the match itself and the deeply entrenched history behind it.
Section 1. The 2026 World Cup Drama, Heartbreak in Atlanta.
To understand the explosion of emotion after the game, we absolutely have to look at the sheer tension of the match itself. England was literally minutes away from making history by reaching their very first Men's World Cup final overseas. But instead, Argentina pulled off a stunning 2-1 comeback victory right in the dying moments. England's manager Thomas Tuchel tried to protect a precious 1-0 lead by falling back into a passive 5-man defense. He subbed off the goal scorer Anthony Gordon in the 72nd minute, shifted to a 5-3-2 formation, and brought on even more defenders in the 82nd. It was a move born of total caution, but man, did it backfire spectacularly. Surrendering the midfield to Lionel Messi's playmaking? Yeah, that proved fatal. Messi casually provided the assist for Enzo Fernandez in the 85th minute, and then for Lautaro Martinez deep into stoppage time. It was just a brutal, rapid-fire collapse.
And the devastation of that tactical collapse was immediate. England captain Harry Kane really captured the mood, saying that once they went 1-0 up, they just seemed to try to hold on, and that falling short like that is, quote, just gutting. Sacrificing all their attacking momentum to invite pressure left the English side completely heartbroken. They were absolutely overwhelmed by wave after wave of Argentine attacks when the finish line was right there in front of them.
But let's contrast that English despair right away with a historical perspective from former Argentina international Diego Simeone. Speaking about past victories against England, Simeone famously said, "Knocking you out was a huge joy." It's a short quote, but it's absolutely vital, because it perfectly captures how intense and deeply personal this transcontinental derby really is. For Argentina, beating England isn't just about advancing in a tournament. It's a profound, almost cathartic joy.
Moving on to Section 2, a fierce football history, decades of drama.
You see, the 2026 semifinal didn't just happen in a vacuum. It's really just the newest chapter in a long timeline of incredibly emotionally charged moments that have scarred and elated both sets of fans for decades. I mean, it goes all the way back to 1966 with what Argentina calls the robbery of the century, when their captain Antonio Rattin was controversially sent off. Then, of course, there's 1986, Diego Maradona's infamous Hand of God, followed literally 4 minutes later by his jaw-dropping goal of the century. Skip to 1998, we get an 18-year-old Michael Owen scoring a total wonder goal, which was completely overshadowed by David Beckham's infamous red card, provoked by none other than Diego Simeone. Beckham got his redemption with a penalty in 2002, and well, now we add the 2026 semifinal heartbreak to the list. Every single time these two teams meet on the pitch, absolute chaos and unforgettable drama are guaranteed.
Now, to really understand Argentina's approach to these massive games, we have to talk about a specific cultural concept, jugar a la pelota, which translates to playing with the ball. As Simeone has explained in the past, in Argentina, football isn't just about rigid professional discipline, not at all. It's deeply rooted in street football. It's all about dribbling, showing off, and crucially, cunning. This is the exact philosophy embodied by Maradona's controversial yet totally brilliant goals in '86, and Simeone's own clever provocation of Beckham in '98. It's this whole mindset that sees outsmarting your opponent as a victory in and of itself.
Which brings us to Section 3, the geopolitical shadow beyond the pitch.
So, you might be wondering, why does a football match carry the weight of a war? Why pull out that banner in 2026? To make sense of that, we have to zoom out from the pitch and look at the geopolitical shadow cast by the 1982 conflict in the South Atlantic. This is where the lines between sport and international relations completely blur. Right after the 1982 conflict, the British government radically increased its military and financial footprint in the region. They essentially established what became known as Fortress Falklands, pouring over £2 billion into constructing the Mount Pleasant Air Base and upgrading garrison facilities. Now, for the islanders, this was a very welcome guarantee of security. But, as you can imagine, this move was heavily criticized by Argentina, who viewed it as an unwelcome and threatening militarization of the South Atlantic.
And that dynamic created a massive diplomatic deadlock that absolutely still defines the region today. On one side, you have Argentina's 1994 constitution, which explicitly mandates the peaceful recovery of sovereignty over the islands. They view it as an inalienable historical right. But directly opposing that, you have the Falkland Islanders, who maintain a steadfast, unwavering commitment to their right of self-determination. They want to remain British and firmly reject any negotiations over sovereignty whatsoever. So it's a strict constitutional claim on one side, clashing directly with an absolute reliance on democratic self-determination on the other.
Let's look at Section 4, Oil, Fish, and Diplomacy, Navigating the South Atlantic.
Yet, despite these incredibly firm, dug-in national stances, the 1990s actually forced a fascinating era of pragmatic diplomacy, driven by, you guessed it, pure economics. Operating under what they called a sovereignty umbrella, basically meaning they agreed to just temporarily put the whole sovereignty dispute in a box to the side, both sides actually established joint commissions. They formed the South Atlantic Fisheries Commission to regulate highly lucrative stocks of squid and hake, and later, a Hydrocarbons Commission to manage offshore oil and natural gas. They were literally sitting at the same table, hammering out shared revenues and environmental standards. It really proved that practical, day-to-day cooperation was possible, even when those massive fundamental disagreements were still lurking in the background.
But, this potential economic boom wasn't universally celebrated. For the islanders, this newfound economic self-sufficiency, driven by selling fishing licenses and the promise of oil revenues, was definitely empowering. It finally gave them their own voice on the world stage. But it was a double-edged sword that brought some real anxiety. There were genuine local fears of becoming a South Atlantic Kuwait. Islanders were seriously worried that a huge influx of foreign oil workers and massive industrial infrastructure would permanently upend their close-knit traditional way of life.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, More Than Just Football, the Enduring Rivalry.
Okay, so how does this whole complex diplomatic dance interact with the raw emotion we see in the World Cup? Well, it's worth noting that the diplomacy of the 90s didn't just stop at oil and fish. During the Menem administration, Argentina actively tried a softer, what they called provincialism strategy, essentially a charm offensive aimed at the islanders. They were sending cartoon videos and books to the island children for Christmas in the early 90s. They even worked with the Red Cross to allow Argentine relatives to visit the graves of the fallen. The Argentine foreign minister at the time made overtures explicitly recognizing that the people living on the island simply had to be factored into any peaceful resolution. It was a very concerted effort to try and build bridges.
But then, look at the stark contrast between those 1990s diplomatic gestures and the banner unfurled on the pitch in 2026. It leaves us with a really profound question. Can a complex web of shared economic interests in oil and fish and pragmatic diplomacy ever truly heal such deep historical wounds? Or will the raw emotion of Las Malvinas son Argentinas, broadcast to millions of fans during football's most dramatic moments, forever remain the final word in this fierce transcontinental rivalry? It's definitely something to ponder the next time these two nations step onto the pitch. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.